The National is next week, and I'm on the hunt for some more cards to flip or trade. Let's scour the shelves of Cards HQ and discuss who or what might be hot in Cleveland. All right, so there are a few different kinds of cards that are always hot at the National. First of all, vintage. Vintage always does well at the National. There are always people after the most iconic players. Any kind of vintage, you'll see tons of dealer booths. So if that's your jam and you haven't been to the National, you're definitely gonna wanna go check that out. There's lots of good vintage options here, at least some at Cards HQ, so I might stop over there and look at that. And football. Football is always hot, and it's because of the time of year. We're about a month away once we hit the National from the preseason, from the regular season starting, and that's when football starts to ramp up. So people are buying, selling, flipping, lots of opportunity with vintage. The third thing that can be a little bit more difficult to move, but you can sometimes find the right person at a trade night in particular, is anything niche, like a one-of-one of an iconic player. If you have those, it's not that everybody's gonna want them. They're not gonna be super liquid, but sometimes if you're posted up at trade night and you see somebody wearing a Giants jersey, a New York Giants jersey, maybe they're after an Eli Manning type card or somebody else, a Lawrence Taylor. So those can be useful if you bring them, if you have the room for them in your Zion case. I'm starting out here, as always, in the Atlanta zone, and there's a couple of players who might be of interest in particular. One could be Kirk Cousins. Some people still hot on him or high on him. His rookie cards in particular, because he doesn't have any Falcons cards out yet, I would only be targeting Kirk Cousins rookie cards, which is obviously going to be with the Redskins, now Commanders, not the Vikings stuff. I don't see Atlanta people going necessarily after second, third, fifth year stuff in the Vikings jerseys. That's going to be reserved for Vikings fans typically, and I don't think many of them are going to be too excited about buying his cards right now that he's gone, right after that exit. Bijan Robinson is a guy that I'm personally very, very, very excited to see what he can do this upcoming season. It's going to be a big gamble, I think, taking him in fantasy football, but a lot of people are high on him. They didn't use him last year. He's incredibly, incredibly talented, probably already like a top 8 talent level running back in the NFL, yet they didn't use him at all last year, not the way they should have. They've got an entirely new revamped coaching staff, so there's lots of Bijan Robinson cards in here. And then Trae Young. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with Trae Young. If he gets traded, and especially, I mentioned this in the past, if he goes to a team like the Lakers, if he goes to a team like the Spurs, if he goes to a contender, I think Trae Young will for sure, his rookie cards specifically, might see a nice price bump. So in this shelf right here, lots of those athletes. There's definitely some Bijan Robinsons in here. There's plenty of Trae Young options. These are the kind of cards that I might be looking at for the National in particular. Really cool gold vinyl fireworks card here out of Prism. That's a really cool card. So this is the kind of stuff that I'd be after, looking for Bijan Robinson cards. Maybe he's a great option. Let me know if you think Bijan's going to have a good year next year, and if you're scooping up any of his cards in advance of the season. All right, so for baseball, we're obviously mid-season. We just crossed the All-Star break, which was a really good game. Really exciting to see that. And there's one player in particular who shined in that game, whose cards I might be looking for right now. But obviously, the couple of guys that you want to be targeting are the guys you think might win MVP. Those are the players whose cards typically, maybe about a month before the season wraps up, end up doing really well on price appreciation. So there's two guys in particular, Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. Those are the two guys of anybody that I might be looking for. And there is an Ohtani right here at Topps Update, pitching red. This is like the Mother's Day jersey. They call it hot pink, PSA 10. So this is not a card that sells super often. These are serial numbered to 50, and PSA 10 just popped 5. This card actually last sold in March for $3,600. Now Ohtani's, let's call it his heat index, his hotness meter at that point was about a month before, or like 2 weeks before the season started. He was pretty hot, but now he's demonstrating he's once again, in spite of not pitching, still the MVP frontrunner. And that card sold for $3,600, which is right what they have this priced at. I think that card, if it went to auction today, personally, I think that actually does a little bit better than that price point. Maybe not too much more, maybe $4,000, $4,100. Ohtani's going to be hot at the National. People are going to be looking for PSA 10 low pop copies of his iconic rookie cards. This is definitely not a bad choice. There's a really nice Gunnar Henderson card here. This is his Topps Gilded collection. That's obviously a newer product, stunning product, high end. This one's an SGC 10. That's the base numbered to 99. That is the base card in spite of being serial numbered. And so what I've done is I pulled up a PSA 10. Why? Because there haven't been any SGC 10 sales of this card. In a PSA 10, it sold for $306 on June 24th. That's like, what, 3-4 weeks ago now? He's incredibly hot. Gunner's really hot. He had a good All-Star game. disappointed a little bit in the home run derby, but people don't pay as much attention to the guys who don't do well as much as they do the winner, like Teoscar Hernandez, whose cards are up 20% just from winning the home run derby. So this is a nice copy at $270. I think that's a pretty reasonable price. I think Gunner's gonna be really hot. Honestly, he's a guy I might start just PCing. Even though he doesn't play, I don't root for the Orioles. I love his game. He's incredible defensively. He's a great hitter. He's got power for a shortstop. He's a fantastic player. That's one that could definitely be hot at the National. There's a few other cards in here as well. Somebody like Derek Jeter is really interesting to me. When you go to the National, all-time great, iconic players, there's always, always, always people in the market for them. Some people who go to the National, that's like their big Super Bowl every year. They go and maybe they don't even buy a lot online. They don't buy on eBay. Maybe they don't have a really good card shop like this in their area. So when they go, they're looking for iconic cards, for rookie cards of the players that they love. So somebody like Derek Jeter could be really interesting. And I actually saw a Derek Jeter card, which is right here. And it's his 1993 SP foil. Now these were really tough grades, so don't let the PSA 8 throw you. PSA 8 obviously popped 9603. Once you go up to 9, it goes down to 628. And when you go to 10, 22. So obviously a PSA 8, that's kind of like a modern PSA 9 type condition, where those 10s are almost like a black label or a BGS 10 pristine in terms of how rare they are on ultra modern cards. This card sold most recently for $390. Now I want to point something out that's really interesting as an aside. You see $390, and then you see $222, and then you see $300 and $325. Well, some of that can have to do with the marketplace that cards sell on. And this one sold on eBay on a best offer. The next one was on a different auction site for love of the game. And it can go both ways. Sometimes cards like this can do really well on smaller auction houses, much better than eBay, and in other cases they don't do as well. It's all about the eyeballs and who's looking for what. It's kind of a roll of the dice. I know people who do very well selling on For Love of the Game and other websites like that, whereas sometimes you want to put these things on eBay to get more eyeballs. So it's kind of a give and take. Fee structures can work in your advantage, but that is why sometimes you'll see these big dips and price changes. But $390, $300, $320, $330, priced at $315. That's right in line. That's a very fair price. And I have no doubt whatsoever that this Derek Jeter card would be very, very easy to put into a trade deal at the National if you're trying to work out something else and get a nice card for your collection, or just to kind of wheel and deal and have something to offer somebody else that's very liquid. So that's another card that I might be considering. Okay, so here's another one that stands out to me. I love image variations, short print image variations, sometimes called photo variations. Sometimes people just refer to them as SP or SSPs. This is an SP image variation. It says photo variation on the Beckett label. Is warm-up jersey, as it's often referred to. It's a rookie card out of 2018 Topps Update, and I actually have one of these in a PSA 9. I'm gonna be bringing it to the National with me as a trade ship, so I just wanna point that out. Full disclosure and transparency too on that card. So if I look at a BGS 9, these don't sell as often. The newer stuff doesn't have as many BGS graded copies. $250 on February 2nd. They're at $215, which is actually a pretty good price. If I switch to a PSA 9, that card is down a little bit on the most recent sale, down to $175. PSA 10, that one's up at $408 most recently. So you can see, it's kind of funny sometimes the price volatility between different grades. One grade might be trending down recent, one might be going up. Often it's about the two equalizing and which one is the leading or lagging indicator. But that Ohtani is a great card, it's a great image. I love the short print stuff like that that's not numbered. So that's one that I know for sure people would be after. Baseball fans love these image variations, and that Ohtani is definitely one that people like to go after. So I gotta take a pause here because Luke's here with his dad. He came all the way down from Illinois. He said he's a fan of our content. He's checking out Cards HQ. Really exciting. You find anything good so far, Luke?
Not
some
yet,
supplies.
I got some supplies.
Okay, how long are you guys here for?
Just today, probably.
Just today? Cool. Here for baseball or just like checking things out? I know there's a big baseball tournament.
Checking things out.
Okay, awesome. And are you going to the National?
No.
Not this year. Have you been yet?
No.
Okay, well maybe when it's back in Chicago next year, we'll see you there. We'll see you at the Market Movers booth. Welcome to the shop, and I hope you guys have a great time.
Okay,
Awesome,
thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I moved over into the raw card section for baseball, and one thing I want to point out to you guys is if you have cards in Market Movers that are not in our 3.5 million card database, which is big, but nowhere near where we plan to have it as we move forward, you can still add cards to your collection manually. And we've got some incredible, I mean incredible enhancements coming next week. We're gonna have them launched in time for the National to speed up the process of adding what we call manual cards to your collection. Now, one of the really cool things that already exists is if you add a manual card to your collection, there is this way to do this check value. And what that does is it basically lets you store your own query for a card. Now, if you select different pieces of a card that we have in our database already, it's gonna write the query for you and do a really good job. So I've got this Jarren Duran card here that I found in the showcase just to sort of show you what this looks like. It's very, very simple. And this card actually recently sold for $40. That's right what they have it priced at. But that was on April 30. That was a while ago in the relation to the baseball season, and Jarren Duran is hot. He's having a great season. He just won All-Star Game MVP. This is a card that I would feel very good about taking to the National. In fact, I might scoop it up and take it there. Now, there's one risk in that, and it comes down to this comp game. When you're negotiating with people, everybody wants to go off last comp. So this is the one that would require actual negotiation, actual wiggle room. Go back to the video I did last week on how to comp rare cards or cards without comps. That was all one of ones for the most part. The same principles apply here. So you want to get to a conclusion that makes sense, talk to people. But any Boston fan, I'm telling you, having an orange refractor rookie card of one of their brightest up-and-coming stars in a season that's been better than most expected for the Red Sox, that's a card for $40 that I really like. I could see about getting it graded potentially and just not take it to the National. I like that Jarren Duran card. And then you start looking at the rest of these. We've got Elly De La Cruz. He's a guy who's been pretty hot. Paul Skeens. I know I laid into the Paul Skeens prices a few weeks ago. I still maintain that they make absolutely no sense relative to all the other pitchers in the universe ever. But like it or not, he's incredibly hot right now. Everything about him is buzzy. He dominated in the one inning that he pitched in the All-Star game. He started the All-Star game. He's probably got one more start next week, I would assume, when he comes out before we hit the National. If he goes out and dominates again, can you imagine if he goes out and throws 7 shutout innings again, like he did no-hit innings? His stuff is bouncing back up. Skeens is another guy that I think will be highly liquid at the National. So that's what, I love the raw section when I look at this. There are a lot of different kinds of cards that can do very well. If you find like super chunky patches, like here's a really cool Barry Larkin Topps Dynasty card with an awesome patch. Some of those cards that are encased right out of the product. It's a one card product. When you open a box, it's encased. A lot of times you'll see these not graded, and they are awesome, awesome, awesome collector pieces. People really like to go after those. So when it's a super chunky patch, something that stands out, that makes a player collector or a team collector stop and go, whoa, I've got to have that. Those are some of the things that can do really well at the National when you have a trade night and you set up and you show people. Now, pro tip, absolutely pro tip here. If you use Market Movers, I know I'm going to talk about, this is the Market Movers channel, by the way, so I'm going to talk about the product that my team helps build all the time. I add the cards to my collection and put them into a category called National every year that I go. Then I've got my case. People say, can I look at these? Sometimes I say, you can just look at my phone. It's more secure than handing out cards. It's the less risk that they're going to steal it. I just got to make sure they don't run off with my phone. And they can actually scroll through. They can see pricing. They can search from my phone for a player they might be interested in. It's very, very useful. I got a lot of compliments on it last year. People said, oh, this is a great idea. You can do that in Market Movers. It's all at your fingertips. And then there's price transparency, no haggling or negotiation. So try out Market Movers. Make sure you do that before the National. Add it into your collection. Take the time to do it. It doesn't take a long time. And a lot of these cards in this raw section are definitely starting to catch my eye. All right, I gotta make a quick pit stop in the hockey section. This isn't always the hottest sport at the National. Obviously, hockey collectors are fewer, but very, very diehard and loyal. And if I'm gonna go hockey, I gotta go with the hottest guy, the up-and-comer, and that's gonna be Connor Bedard. Obviously, last year was his rookie season. He had a pretty solid year. He's definitely got talent. So his Young Guns 2023, you got some PSA 10 copies, you got a PSA 9, and you've got a raw copy, actually. What's interesting is the 9s are going for about the same price, or in some cases less than the raw versions. Well, I like 9s. 9s are fine. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at pricing here. $333. This one's at $300. But you do see some volatility at $317, $337. Still, $300, very fair price. So I'm gonna look at the history on this card. This is what's really important. Now, I pointed this out in a video that I did. When this card hit the market, I pointed this out and I said, don't get sucked into this trap of paying $926 for this card, or even $700, or even $500. The prices always come down on these Young Gun PSA 10s and PSA 9s over time. Now, here's what else happens. So right now, this card's been hovering, $320 to, $350, $360, basically since the season wrapped. How can we try to predict whether this card has any room to go back up? Well, like I said, Bedard showed some really good signs, so that's a good thing for starters. But what if I go back here, and I'm gonna go to the dashboard, and I'm gonna switch to Cole Caulfield and look at his PSA 9. He was the hot guy a few years ago in 2021's product, and I've got all data. And you can see the cards, like I said, they come way down, 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 down. Nothing like Bedard's, he didn't have quite that much buzz. But let's look at where these things came down. And then there was this dip into the summer, and it was like $91, right? $92. And then it went back up during the season to start the season in the $130, $140 range. So you have this little dip, and then before the season, it starts to rise up. You'd see the same thing if you look at Alexis Lafreniere's cards from the year before that. Go look at these players. You can use that price history for these top prospects in any sport to see that trend, that it happens. It happens universally almost every time, where their cards will come down, and then they chill out over the summer in a dip. They start to rise up before the season. That's a great and very predictable pattern for the top prospects in any sport in the first few years. So if you're into the short-term speculation, a card like this could be a great option. And I do think of hockey players, Connor Bedard's gonna be very hot at the National. All right, so basketball typically isn't necessarily the hottest sport. Like I said, it's football at the National. Basketball does get hot sometimes leading into the season, but a lot of times this is kind of the dip. If you're into buying at the dip at the National, sometimes maybe trading football or some of the hotter baseball players for basketball could be a good idea. There's a big difference at the National for basketball versus like leading into the season in terms of who I might want to go after or expect to go up. Right now, I'd be looking at the hottest names. Follow the hype beast, follow that crowd. And that's first and foremost, without a question, that's gonna be Victor Wembanyama. Any Victor Wembanyama cards, there's a purple flash PSA 10 select here. You got his green rookie card PSA 10. Any Wembys are definitely gonna be hot. And then sometimes the GOAT cards, I talked about it in the past with Kobe, MJ, LeBron, these types of players. Luka's a guy right now that I probably wouldn't be thinking is going to sell particularly well at the National. I mean, I think he'll be moving. I think there'll be volume. I don't expect his prices to be bouncing back necessarily yet, but maybe as we head into the season, people will start to get more excited about Luka's card prices. So there's some of the guys that I'd be interested in. I'll do a video in the future about some of the under the radar guys, some bounce back candidates who I think might be good targets as we head into the NBA season. All right, so now this is where it gets serious, because this is the stuff I'm telling you that moves, and especially with the kids. If you come to the Card Kids trade zone and see, you're not gonna be able to trade. No adults allowed in the trade zone for kids, but you will see these kids with Zion cases with 2, 3, 5, sometimes, I'm not kidding you, $50,000 worth of cards, and it's almost always dominated by football and Pokemon. They definitely do some basketball and baseball, but these are the big sports with kids, and then they're the big sports with adults, and it's all about quarterbacks. Now, the kids, they all love Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is the guy that all the kids love. They don't love Mahomes. Mahomes has done all the things. He's won all the awards, but the kids don't love Mahomes. They love Joe Burrow. They also love Jordan Love. They love CJ Stroud. They like Brock Purdy sometimes. They like basically everybody but the guy who keeps winning year over year. I know, I'm a Chiefs fan and a Mahomes fan. But there's definitely some cool cards in here, including, this card is really nice looking, the CJ Stroud stained glass out of 2023 Mosaic, PSA 10. So I've got it pulled up here on Market Movers Pop 116. So maybe not as short printed as people think these stained glasses are. Panini's gotten a little tricky over the years by having these case hits that used to be rare, and then they slowly ramp up the pop count to like, or the print runs to 200, 300, 400 cards sometimes. Nevertheless, a stunning card, stained glass, very popular. 1875 last sale on July 16, 2000, 1800, 1900, 2000. Very fair price, I think, at $18.50. Stroud's gonna be really hot at the National. You got some Joe Burrow cards in here. Tua is another guy that some people are high on, so it's all about the quarterbacks. Aside from a few of those up-and-coming running backs like Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs has had some buzz, maybe a Christian McCaffrey in certain cases if you can get a good deal on him, but it's definitely all about the quarterbacks. Those are what are gonna be very liquid, and I would stick to the guys who are young and active in this case, more than I might Tom Brady, except for like Bowman Chrome, like the iconic Tom Brady stuff. People are always hunting for that, more in like that vintage mindset and those all-time great cards. More obscure Brady stuff, you're probably better off selling that online, running auctions, than trying to expect to be able to move that stuff at the National. So football, it's gonna be very hot. Now there is one more, I'll just show you this Jordan Love card, and I saw it down here. This is just, you know, for those who have a tighter budget, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars. I don't want to give that impression whatsoever. Many of these kids literally have chipped their way from age 10 up to 14 or 15 now, building these incredible collections. And there is a Jordan Love card here. It just says Panini Select, so we can pull that one up. I've got it saved here. And I'll just pull that one up. So let's look. This card's Pop 734 out of Select PSA 10 Concourse. Recent sales, $40, $42, $43, $42, $50, holding steady at $45. Let's look and see where that card has been over time. So that one dipped down last year, actually down into the $10 to $20 range when it looked like Jordan Love might not be the guy. And then you obviously had a good season last year, topped out maybe in that $60 to $75 range. It's definitely come down a little bit. I would not be surprised to see that Jordan Love card probably get up maybe to the $55, $60 range before the season. That's what I would expect. And then if he comes out and he has a few really good games, it could shoot back up into that $80 or $90 range for a guy like him. If he doesn't, well, that's where things can get dicey. So it's all about the gamble you want to take. But going into the National, again, this is the type of card that I would just expect to be very liquid. Jordan Love's going to be hot, as are some of the other guys that I just mentioned. All right, so this video would not be complete if I did not make a pit stop at the baseball vintage section. Now, understand some of this can be somewhat cost prohibitive. Honestly, that's the biggest problem I have a lot of times with vintage. I don't dabble in this like $500 to $5,000 range very typically. It's just not the budget I'm working with usually. But there are some great cards in here if you've got that type of an eye. And I'm telling you, these things always move for the most iconic cards, like this 1950 Bowman Jackie Robinson. It's a PSA 1.5. In spite of that, the color is still beautiful. It stands out. It's obviously got some corner and centering issues and a little bit of registration problems, some damage. That's why it's a 1.5. Still, $1,300 is pretty fair for that card. Obviously, Mickey Mantle always moves really well, but you know who else does right now? Rest in peace is Willie Mays. Willie Mays cards have been very hot, unsurprisingly, since his untimely, or I guess maybe timely passing. He was quite old. And you've got a nice Willie Mays out of 1961. You've got a nice Willie Mays out of 1962. There's a handful, a smattering of Willie Mays cards throughout here. Here's another one from 1971. So definitely some cool Willie Mays. And then I'll throw in Roberto or Bob Clemente. You got Ricky Henderson, as well as Satchel Paige. That 1953 Topps might be my favorite vintage set of all time from a design perspective. I absolutely love that set. So that's a beautiful and very iconic cards. These things all move. They move at the National for these top tier players. Some of the other ones, any other players like Lou Boudreau, I know some of you are gonna hate on me, but not everybody knows who that is. But if you go to the big names, you'll even have kids walking around who have gotten super into vintage, which is really exciting because I like to see the legacy of these cards carry forward into the future. So vintage, very hot at the National. You got to check some of these out. All right, so that does it for this week. I've got some tough decisions to make. I've only got so much money. I've still got some store credit left here at Cards HQ. So I've got to figure out which of these cards is going to be best for me to take to the National Help Wheel and Deal. Make sure you tune in next week because I'm going to be live from the show talking about what I'm going after, maybe talking to some dealers. It can be really exciting. And like I said, stop by the booth. If you're at the show, we'll be there. We'll be giving away packs and boxes for free. So make sure to stop by and say hello. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.